Welcome to another edition of Dianne Andrews in Black and White, an open discussion about the issues you don't want to talk about and the arts you need to know. Now, here's your host, Dianne Andrews.
Welcome to In Black and White. I'm your host, Dianne Andrews. I appreciate you taking the time out to be with us today, and I really appreciate our viewing audience out there in TV land. But I'm looking at this inside audience, and they look good. I'm telling you, they're black and white down. Our panelists look good, and I'm sure the people at home look the same way. I know they have their 5-inch heels on like I do, and I know their hair is done, and their makeup is done, and they're looking at us, looking back at them. So we appreciate everybody for being here. That's why several years ago when I decided to do the show, I wanted to make something that was worth people's time and worth my time. Something that broadened people's experience and gave them a level playing field of information to decide on what they want to do on several topics. Today I've chosen the topic that they say don't choose. The topic that wars are fought about. The topic that people are killed about. The topic people divorce over. And that topic, you probably already guessed, is religion. People kill in the name of Allah. They kill in the name of God. They just kill. But what we want to do is try to stop some of the holy wars and try to stop some of the wars for at least people with their negative falsehoods will understand better each religion. I have taken 7 people. We're going to split it over 2 shows, including an atheist and 6 religious people. I'd like to talk to you about the graphic on your screen. You'll see that there are 2.2 billion Christians in the world, which does include Catholicism, which is the largest Christian religion out here today. And we have the Protestant, of course, Baptist, Jehovah's Witness, Seventh-day Adventist. The next largest usually surprises people. The Nation of Islam is 1.5 billion people. Non-religious, which is the Atheist, Humanist, Agnostic Society, and it is an agnostic society with conventions around the world. They just had a convention this fall on the west coast of America. That is over 1 billion people. Remember, there are about 6.9, almost 7 billion people in the world, so 1/7 either do not believe in God or are on the fence and don't understand or don't know if there's a God or not. Hinduism is 14%, which is 900 million people in the world are Hindu. Buddhism is also very large. It's the same as the number of people in America, which is 375 billion people. What I want to do, what we've assembled today for you, is a panel of 4 people from 4 different, very different religions and 1 non-religious, which is our atheist to my left and Reverend Dr. René Brown are on the same couch. And we have Rabbi from the Judaism religion, which is 14 million people. And we have Brother Muhammad from the Nation of Islam. Now we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Thank you.
Stay tuned. Dianne Andrews in Black and White. We'll be right back.
When I grow up, I'll be a chef. Because chefs get to cook yummy cheeseburgers, pizza, and chocolate everything. I'll write a cookbook that's just for kids. And there'd be a rule: no vegetables.
If your child is sick over and over again, it could be PI, a defect in the immune system that affects millions. Early detection can give children a chance to dream.
Unless there are those things that look like carrots, but are really jelly beans.
Before any ado, then let's start talking about with the people that are here today. And I welcome my guest. We're going to take everybody in alphabetical order so no one will feel slighted. I have representing the AHA Society of LSU is Mr. Taylor. I'll let you tell them everything about you, Taylor, but you are representing LSU, and I do know that you were born with 2 Catholic parents, and you went to Catholic school, and when you were a teenager, you decided, I don't feel this, and this is not what I want to do. And I'll ask you, that journey is 8 years ago, because now you're a graduate of LSU with the 2 separate majors, and you started into the workforce. Tell me what it was like to tell your parents what you told them.
It was a very difficult experience. I would compare it to the experience a gay person might have of coming out, although I wouldn't say it's quite as bad, because the reaction to that can be very severe. But when I did finally have to tell them, and I had to because it came time for me to do confirmation, you're supposed to choose an adult that you trust in the church that's supposed to be your sponsor. And I didn't feel like I was able to do that because I would have to pick someone I trust and then lie to them over the course of several months. I really wasn't willing to do that, so it was time for me to tell my parents that my heart wasn't in it.
How long has you felt that way, Taylor, before you actually told
Probably
them?
2 or 3 years.
Was there one thing that made you think, did something happen to make you think this, or was it over time I just didn't feel?
It was a very gradual transition. I think one of the first things is that I never really enjoyed church services or going to church. That might have opened me up to thinking about maybe how some of these ideas aren't necessarily the right ones. So I think one of the first things that really struck me is how we were always taught very specific, very, very direct things about God and the angels, and we said these things with a great deal of certainty, and it just struck me as absurd because we also understood we can't see any of these things, and we also admit that God is mysterious. And so that really started me on the road toward questioning some of the things that the Bible says and some of the moral wisdom of the church.
Now, I know from speaking with you earlier, you'd have been to Unity and other non-denominational churches. Is that correct?
Right. I had been, as part of an exchange for our Atheist, Humanists, and Agnostics at LSU, with another group, we had agreed that they would come to one of our events if we decided to come to one of their services. I don't recall what their group was called at the time, but it was interesting, but it was also made me and the rest of my fellow atheists, humanists, and agnostics a little uncomfortable because you could see this very spirited ceremony where people were engaged and obviously feeling something there that we weren't.
Now, you are still a minority in the world. When we talk about almost 7 billion people, you're 1/7 of the world, which is a large population. But do you think these other religions, the Christianity, the Nation of Islam, Hindu has almost 900 million people, which is started in Asia, and that is the oldest religion. Buddhism has as many people as we do in America. 376 million are Buddhist. So do you think everyone else is wrong, or how do you look at that?
I don't necessarily think, I mean, on one level, I think everyone thinks they have the right idea, but on a different level, I think that the different perspectives are valuable and that those ideas pulling against each other is valuable. And so I guess I would say that I think that the people who talk about God and believing in God, I understand what they're talking about, and I think that the effects they experience and things they feel are real to them.
What about a miracle? And people who, did anyone see heaven? Heaven is for real? And the little boy who died and went to heaven, I don't know if anyone saw that in here, but it showed that he saw Grandpa, and Grandpa he'd never seen in life before.
I mean, all of these stories, when you start really digging into them, from our perspective, they end up looking really dubious the more you learn about them. And any effort that there's been to really test it usually makes those strange phenomena disappear.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Taylor. And we're going to come back around. I've asked everyone, we're going to talk about a negative falsehood that they want to dispel, and that's what this is all about, to talk about some of the negatives also in each religion. And next we'll go to our Baptist, Reverend Dr. René Brown, who I am a Baptist and attend his church. All right, Dr. Brown.
Good morning. How are you?
Tell us a little bit about you and why you are a Baptist. How did you choose it, and why it's right for you, and you probably think it's right for everyone.
Well, I basically grew up in the Louisiana Delta. I'm a direct descendant of plantation families, and all of our churches were Baptist churches. And so I grew up Baptist. My dad was a Baptist deacon. My mother was a Baptist choir member. And all of my family was Baptist. And so I had a lot of questions. We were in the rural. We didn't have Sunday school. We really didn't have Bible study. They would always just tell us, look, just believe it. And I just questioned everything. I'm inquisitive by nature. My degrees are science background degrees. And so I'm just one of those individuals that always questions, and I like to go through hypotheses and scientific theories and all of that kind of stuff. And so as I continued to get older, I came to Southern University as an undergraduate, and I just kind of got away from home and just did all the things I wanted to do, and stopped going to church. And
you had another career before you were a minister.
Yes,
Reverend?
I worked for the DuPont Corporation for 15 years, and I was in corporate America, and I was rising up the ladder and all of that good stuff. And something happened to me. I'd had a lot of near-death experiences. And
you personally?
Me personally. There was a plane crash in Sioux City, Iowa, that a lot of people didn't make it off of. And it was just a journey for me, because I started calculating all of the stuff that had happened. And I had to make a change in my life.
Yeah.
I had a head-on collision on Plank Road here in the city when I was in college. I wrecked a car and went underneath a cotton trailer and just barely missed a light pole. And after a while, you just kind of start thinking, well, wait, something is going on.
Yeah.
And so after that plane incident, I told the Lord, I'll do what you ask. And he called me to preach when I was young. I didn't want to preach because I'd heard so many bad things about preachers, and I just didn't want to be a preacher. And I basically ran, and after that plane crash, I stopped running.
I've seen some movies on plane crash victims, and a lot of times they wonder, why was my life saved?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have that feeling after you saw all these near-death experiences that God is saving me for a purpose-driven life? And,
oh, yes.
And it was in the ministry, is
oh, yes.
what you thought?
I had always seen God had something for me. I just didn't understand it. And it just took a long time for me to figure it out. And once I figured it out, I basically settled on Baptist, because after going to seminary, you study and you look at different denominations and all of that kind of stuff. I could handle the Baptist doctrine a whole lot better because of my background.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.
You're welcome.
Next, we're going to go over to our Jewish Judaism Rabbi from Beth Shalom, which means House of Peace, Rabbi Gardner. Let's start talking. Tell us a little bit about your journey, Reverend.
Well, I was born in a Jewish family with two Jewish parents. Although my parents were not religious, my family was not very religious, and I grew up also not very religious. And again, like the previous gentleman, I guess I would say I was an agnostic. I had no proof that God existed. I had no proof that God didn't exist. And it occurred to me one day that whether or not we believe in God's existence, there come moments in our lives when we need to pray to God. We need to ask God for something. For example, suppose you have a kid and the kid gets lost in the woods, God forbid. You know, you're going to pray whether or not you believe in God.
Right.
When you're sitting by the bedside of a parent who's dying, when you're laying in bed dying, you may not believe that God exists, but you want God to exist, and you reach out to God. So I said to myself, wouldn't it be better to reach out now before I need God, so that when I do need God, I have a relationship?
Because if I remember correctly, you studied in Japan. You also lived in Japan. You did not start off studying Judaism as a young child.
It was definitely a second career for me, yeah.
And your parents were shocked.
They were shocked. I, like Taylor, I felt like I was coming out to them.
Yeah.
And my father, who was against organized religion, he was very unhappy about it.
What did he want you to stay in Japan and stay in Japanese studies, or what did he want you to do with your life?
He wanted me to go into, I don't know what he wanted me to do. I offered once to go into his business. He was in the theater. And he didn't want me to do it. He wanted me to do something
That's right,
better.
you're from New York, that's
Yeah,
right.
he wanted me to do something better than what he had done. Okay. But I found that once I started praying and I started reaching out to God,
Yeah.
then I felt God's presence. I never felt it before that. And when I hear people say, "Oh, well, I don't pray because I don't believe in God," I think they have it backwards. That they don't believe in God because they've never prayed. And there's a sense of God
Let me just
that we
ask
get.
the question
Yeah.
to Taylor. Taylor, have you prayed? And
I mean, when I was much younger, I did, and there was even a time where I realized that something was wrong. This is around 7th, 8th grade, middle school, where I really stepped up my efforts. I got involved in Mass. I started reading scriptures during Mass and participated in youth group activities and volunteer work where I was trying to reach out. And after I did that, I realized that there wasn't really anyone reaching back out to me.
Okay, just wanted to see
That
if
was my experience.
the opposite, because he was a little opposite. He was coming out in a positive way, we would say, Christians would say. And you were coming out when what your parents thought was a negative way, when you were telling him his parents didn't want him to go into the rabbi, to become a rabbi. Okay.
That's right, yeah. But I started studying Judaism, and one thing led to another, and the more I studied, the more connected I felt to it. I feel very strongly that there's something in the world beyond the physical, beyond the scientific, more than we see. There's love, there's beauty, and there's holiness, which I think that as human beings we have a sense of holiness, and that's what I seek in my religion, to connect to that holiness, which I call God.
Thank you, Rabbi. Next, we're going to go to Brother Muhammad, Daryl Muhammad from the mosque, the Muhammad Mosque, I think, here. And Brother, talking to you, I remember that your parents are not Muslim, and you're from someplace else, East Coast or somewhere. Tell us a little bit about when you told them that you decided to join the Nation of Islam.
Well, I would say that my background, I was raised much the same way that Reverend was raised, as a Baptist. My father actually pastors a very large 6,000 member Baptist church in the Atlanta area. And so initially, you know, there really was not a lot of problem, because my cousin is Naeem Akbar, a very famous scholarly Muslim who's a cousin of ours. And of course there was, or there has been, a lot of openness within my family. But the thing that led me to it is I was, I guess, very disillusioned with respect to how God would view the condition of black people in America. I was very disillusioned about the prospects, and I wanted an answer from God about it. And when I heard Minister Farrakhan speaking about it, and speaking about Scripture and where we would fit in that Scripture, it showed me a scriptural or divine way out that would eventually happen for myself as well as our people and our condition. And so that is what initially led me to begin to look at Islam, and of course to begin to look at the righteous life that we're supposed to live. You really don't have to worry about you know, getting caught cheating on your wife if you're faithful to your wife. So that was really appealing, just eliminating a lot of the stress of an unrighteous lifestyle. And
Let
so,
me ask you something. You brought up black. The Nation of Islam, with 1.5 billion people, is not totally a black religion, is it, Brother Muhammad?
Well, let me just say this: Islam, it has been open to anyone, regardless of the color of your skin, to enter into it. And of course it means to submit to the will of God. And any human being, regardless of the color of that person's skin or the texture of that person's hair, can agree that they're going to submit to God's will. And that is, of course, is
And
our
you believe
position.
that you were the first religion, after, we're all going to say Hindu is number one because it, you know, has no deity, but the first religion worshiping God. I think you and the rabbi may disagree on that one.
Well, I will say this. We are taught that God is the author of our religion, and our religion is as old as God himself. So there was never a religion named in the Bible. Jesus said, he never said, look, you must be a Christian. But it was always to obey God. So no matter what you call it, obedience to God is the only religion that there ever was, and the only religion that there ever will be.
What do you think then of the perception that all Muslims are terrorists, and if you're going to get 16 virgins going to heaven if you wrap a bomb around you and blow yourself up and kill other people, which is the negative perception or falsehood? I think you would disagree with that.
I would say that that's really outlandish. That's more of something maybe from Fox News rather than something that
a black guy told me this yesterday who is very educated,
really,
and who is in entertainment.
Well,
and that perception, I tell you, is a whole lot different than Fox News.
Well, I'm going to say this.
Okay.
That's something that I have not been taught in my religion, and I interact with Muslims from all over the world, and I have never ever heard that except outside of the religion. I've heard that coming from outside,
right,
but never from inside. But the other thing I would say is that the FBI actually did a study where the vast majority of all terrorism cases that have ever been brought over a 25-year period were non-Muslims, were brought against non-Muslims.
That's very good information for the audience to know. Let me go back to you, Rabbi. What we hear about the Jewish people, a falsehood, is the fact that you all run the world, and that you all are rich, and you control media, and everything that gets out in the public is coming from the Jewish people who run the media industry in America.
Well, I would like to say something regarding what Brother Muhammad just said, is that if you read the Quran, as I have read the Quran, you see that they're completely against the killing of innocent people. And I think there are Muslims, as we see in the Middle East, who do terrorist activities. I don't think they're following the Quran. I don't think they're good Muslims.
That's great. And I think you can say we have terrorists in America, the Oklahoma bombing.
Absolutely.
In America, so all Americans terrorists. But let's talk a few seconds on the Jewish negativity or falsehoods out there.
You know, there has been anti-Jewish feeling in the world since Roman times. Not quite sure why, except that for many people, Jews were the only other that existed, the only people who stood out. In Europe, for example, in the Middle Ages, everyone was pretty much the same. You know, everyone looked the same. Everyone was white. Everyone was Christian, except the Jews. And then in the Muslim world, also everyone was the same. Everyone looked the same, and everyone was Muslim except the Jews. So the Jews were always, in the old days, they were the other.
Yeah. It's like black people in some places.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They were the minority, and therefore, when people wanted to express hatred, they very often expressed it against the Jews. When people wanted to control their political followers, they riled them up against the Jews, just as people in this country riled people up against blacks.
Yeah.
And one of the complaints about Jews was that, oh, they're rich, they run the world.
And I don't know why being rich is a complaint. I haven't gotten that one yet, but it is said.
Well, they own the banks, they're squeezing money out of you, and so on and so forth. It's just anti-Semitism. It's racism. When people say that. You know, certainly there are Jewish people who are in the finance business. There are lots of poor Jews as well who are struggling just like anybody else.
Just like normal people. But I will say this, for economies of scale, there are only 50 million Jews in the world and 14 million in the Judaism religion. So that's one of the smallest but most powerful religions in the world. I'm going to wrap it up real quick with talking about a negativity, a falsehood that atheists are prejudiced. You know, there was a billboard that said that slaves you must obey. We talked about that Taylor put up in Philadelphia 2 years ago with a black African man with a chain around his neck that said, "Slave, you must obey your master." And atheists paid for that billboard.
Those are the antics.
You can see it on the screen.
Those are the antics of American atheists. There are different groups of atheists and agnostics, especially in the United States. So I don't want to, paint them all with one really broad stroke. But Some of us do enjoy trying to anger the religious establishment. I mean, there is a good intention behind it, but I don't think it's a very constructive way of criticizing.
You're a little more acceptance also of gay marriages and gay. I've talked to some atheists who are gay, and I think you're a little more accepting, correct, and of legalizing of marijuana.
Right, and we can talk all about how those aren't religious issues,
Right.
but the fact is that oftentimes the debate is cut in half by everyone who seems to be against gay marriage. All of those people tend to be
It turns out to be
religious.
against religious lines.
And
we're going to move on to Dr. Brown. And Dr. Brown, on your, in the Baptist religion, I know you don't believe in gay marriages. Is that correct? And legalization of marijuana. But I did want to, one of the negativities on the Baptist religion is the differences, and the cultures are not the same. I can go to one Baptist church here, and it's not the same, whereas you go to a Catholic church, you may have the same traditions, and that the ministers spend too much money on themselves instead of helping the community. Do you want to address that briefly for us, Dr. Brown?
Well, I think on the first point, when you look at the whole concept about the Baptist faith, there's a word we use called autonomy, and that autonomy is what creates that. You can go to 9 different Baptist churches, and all 9 of them will be different. Each church has its own culture, and the culture is oftentimes derived from the pastor. It's personality driven, especially in the African American church. It's personality driven, and so you'll find all kinds of leaders within that ranking. As it relates to money, you know, people will always say different things about what the pastor does with the money, so forth and so on. But when you really look at it, the bottom line is you have to do ministry. And generally speaking, in the Baptist church, the pastor doesn't have that kind of leeway to just spend money like that. Now, you have exceptions in every group.
Right.
But the bottom line is, especially where I pastor, you don't have that kind of freedom to spend that kind of money, especially on yourself.
Zion, for sure.
Especially on yourself.
Yes.
You know, you want to do some things ministry-wise, community-wise, but you can't just have that kind of freelance spending.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.
You're welcome.
Stay tuned. Dianne Andrews in Black and White. We'll be right back.
You can try to ignore it, but the problem is everywhere. Every instinct says don't look, but sooner or later we must, and our reaction is only natural. Mice contaminate food and transmit disease. Termites cost billions of dollars in property damage each year. And cockroaches can trigger asthma attacks and spread salmonella. Trust your instincts. Learn more about how to protect your family at pestworld.org.
You always made sure I brushed my teeth.
You told me that smart was cool.
You always told me to dream big.
To all of those parents who took the time to make raising their children their most important job, we'd like to say,
thank you.
Thank you.
From the bottom of my heart, thanks, Mom and Dad.
This message is brought to you by the U.S. Air Force.
I hope that we provided a very interesting, thought-provoking show for you today, but more importantly, that we've been able to show you some things that you did not know and didn't realize, and it will help you throughout your life. In Black and White, there are always shades of gray, and we just need to learn how to live together and everyone be able to respect each other. When I was a little girl, I saw a show that said, if everyone lit just one little candle, what a bright world this would be. Thank you.